The massive alien ship dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the solar system. Its hull gleamed with a dark metal that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Inside the bridge, Commander Theklos stood before the main viewing screen, his forearms crossed behind his back. His species, the Veltai, had been traveling between stars for over 3 million years. They were among the oldest and most advanced races in the galaxy. "Long-range sensors are active, Commander," reported Science Officer Mordain from her station. Her tentacles danced across the control panels with practiced ease. "We are approaching the third planet of this system. The one the natives call Earth." Theklos nodded slowly. The last time the Veltai had visited this world was 500,000 years ago. It had been part of their Great Galactic Survey, a massive project to catalog every inhabited world in their section of the galaxy. Earth had been noted as a primitive world inhabited by violent bipedal mammals who had barely learned to make fire. The survey team had spent only a few days studying the early humans. Their report had been brief. "Species shows potential for intelligence but displays excessive aggression and unpredictable behavior. Not recommended for uplift or contact. Suggest monitoring in 500,000 to 1,000,000 years." Now it was time for that follow-up visit. "What do our old records say about this world?" asked Communications Officer Zevara, his translator device turning his clicks and whistles into standard galactic. Mordain pulled up the ancient files on her screen. Population was estimated at less than 1 million individuals spread across the planet. Technology level was Stone Age with early use of bronze in some regions. No space travel, no advanced mathematics, no unified government. The species called themselves humans and spent most of their time fighting each other over territory and resources. Theklos chuckled, a sound like grinding rocks. "Typical young species behavior. I wonder if they manage to avoid destroying themselves. Most primitive races either blow themselves up or poison their world within the first million years." "Beginning detailed scans now," Mordain announced. Her tentacles froze over the controls. Her large eyes widened in confusion. "Commander, I'm getting some very strange readings." "Define strange," Theklos said, moving to look over her shoulder. "The electromagnetic signatures from the planet are intense, far beyond what I would expect from a developing civilization. And there are structures in orbit around the world that don't match any known technology patterns." Theklos frowned. His people had encountered thousands of species over the millennia. They knew what to expect from worlds at various stages of development. Young civilizations might have crude satellites or basic space stations. Advanced civilizations built orbital cities and manufacturing platforms. But the readings Mordain was showing him made no sense. "Show me the visual spectrum," he ordered. The main screen flickered and displayed Earth as seen from their current position. Theklos expected to see a blue and green world with perhaps some lights on the night side indicating cities. Instead, he saw something that made his blood run cold. Massive structures orbited the planet in perfect geometric patterns. They weren't the rough metal constructions he expected from a young spacefaring race. These were smooth, flowing shapes that seemed to bend light around themselves. Some appeared to exist in folded space, visible from multiple angles at once in ways that hurt to look at. "How many orbital structures?" he asked quietly. "I count at least 300 major installations," Mordain replied, her voice shaking slightly. "But Commander, that's not the strangest part. I'm detecting energy signatures that I don't recognize. Some of these structures are using power sources that shouldn't be possible." Zevara suddenly straightened at his station. "Commander, I'm picking up transmissions from the planet. Massive amounts of data flowing between the surface and the orbital structures. The complexity it's beyond our computer's ability to process." "That's impossible," Theklos said. "Show me the data streams." A cascade of symbols and numbers filled a secondary screen. The information flowed so fast and in such volume that it made Theklos dizzy to watch. In all their millions of years of space travel, the Veltai had never encountered data transmission of this density and sophistication. "How long has it been since our last visit?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. "Exactly 500,000 years, Commander," Mordain confirmed. Theklos felt something cold settle in his stomach. 500,000 years was nothing in cosmic terms. His own species had taken over 2 million years to develop from their first use of fire to basic space travel. Even the fastest developing races they knew of took at least 800,000 years to achieve true spacefaring civilization. "Continue scanning," he ordered. I want to know everything about this world before we get any closer. As their ship moved through the outer solar system, the readings became more and more disturbing. The asteroid belt between the fourth and fifth planets showed signs of massive mining operations. Several of the outer planets' moons had been completely hollowed out and converted into something that looked like artificial habitats. "Commander?" Zavara called out, his voice tight with worry. "I'm detecting movement throughout the solar system. Multiple objects changing course and heading in our direction." "Ships?" Theklos asked. "I believe so, but they don't match any known design patterns. And Commander, some of them appear to be using our own stealth technology." The bridge fell silent. Veltai stealth technology was among the most advanced in the galaxy. They had developed it over hundreds of thousands of years and had never shared it with any other species. "How is that possible?" Theklos whispered. Before anyone could answer, every screen on the bridge lit up with an incoming transmission. The signal was coming through channels that shouldn't have existed, using communication methods that were both familiar and completely alien at the same time. The face that appeared on the main screen was human, but not like the primitive humans from their old records. This being had clear, intelligent eyes and moved with a confidence that spoke of advanced civilization. When he spoke, it was in perfect Veltai language, complete with the subtle grammatical forms that took decades to master. "Welcome back to Sol Space, Commander Theklos," the human said with a slight smile. "My name is Kim Dae-ho, Director of Earth's Xenological Contact Division. We've been expecting you." Theklos felt his legs go weak. How did this creature know his name? How did it know they were coming? And how in all the burning stars of the galaxy did it speak their language so perfectly? "We would be honored to host a delegation from the Veltai Confederation," Kim Dae-ho continued. "We have much to discuss, and I believe you'll find our world quite different from what your records indicate." The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in stunned silence. "Commander," Mordain said in a voice barely above a whisper, "our sensors show that we're now completely surrounded. There are ships all around us, and they all appeared seemingly from nowhere." Theklos looked at the tactical display and felt his heart stop. Dozens of contacts had appeared on their screens, ships that hadn't been there moments before. They formed a perfect sphere around the Veltai vessel, close enough to fire weapons but far enough away to seem non-threatening. "Are their weapons powered?" he asked. "No, Commander. They appear to be in a peaceful configuration, but—" Mordain paused. "Some of these ship designs look familiar. I'm seeing what appears to be Kethvac assault cruisers, Lumway exploration vessels, and Zorthak research ships." Theklos knew those species. The Kethvac had vanished from the galaxy 200,000 years ago. The Lumway had disappeared 150,000 years ago. The Zorthak had been missing for 300,000 years. All had been advanced civilizations that had simply stopped communicating with the rest of the galaxy one day. "Set course for Earth," Theklos said quietly. "It appears we don't have much choice in the matter." As their ship began moving toward the blue world ahead, Theklos couldn't shake the feeling that they had made a terrible mistake in coming here. The humans weren't the primitive creatures they had expected to find. They were something else entirely. Something that had somehow learned to use technologies from species that had vanished long ago. The worst part was the growing realization that they weren't just being invited to visit Earth, they were being hunted. The Veltai ship moved slowly toward Earth, surrounded by the mysterious fleet that had appeared from nowhere. Commander Theklos stood on the bridge, trying to make sense of what they were seeing. His crew worked quietly at their stations, but he could feel their fear. "Incoming transmission," announced Zavara. Multiple channels this time. The main screen flickered to life, showing not one but two humans. The first was Kim Dae-ho, who had spoken to them earlier. The second was a man in what appeared to be military dress, though the uniform design was unlike anything in their databases. "Commander Theklos," Kim Dae-ho said with that same calm smile. "Allow me to introduce Park Jinwoo, our military coordinator. He wanted to personally welcome you to our system." Park Jinwoo nodded respectfully. When he spoke, his Veltai was as perfect as Kim Dae-ho's, but there was something in his tone that made Theklos' skin crawl. "We hope your journey was comfortable, Commander. It's been quite some time since we've had visitors from the Veltai Confederation. How do you know our language?" Theklos asked, his voice barely steady. "And how did you know we were coming?" Kim Dae-ho tilted his head slightly. "We've had 500,000 years to prepare for your return visit, Commander. Your people are very thorough in their record keeping. We found your observation logs quite helpful in understanding your communication methods. That's impossible, Science Officer Mordain interrupted from her station. Those logs were encrypted with quantum keys that would take millions of years to break. Park Jin-woo's smile grew slightly wider. Time is something we've had plenty of, honored Science Officer Mordain. We've become quite good at solving complex problems during your absence. The fact that he knew Mordain's name and rank sent another chill through the bridge. Their ship's crew roster should have been completely unknown to any outside force. We would like to invite a small delegation to visit Earth, Kim Dae-ho continued. There's so much we'd like to show you. Our world has changed significantly since your last survey. Theklos looked at the tactical display showing the ships surrounding them. Each one was maintaining perfect formation, moving with a coordination that suggested either advanced computer control or some form of shared consciousness. And if we decline your invitation, why would you want to do that? Park Jin-woo asked, sounding genuinely puzzled. You've traveled so far to visit us. Surely you're curious about what we've become. It wasn't really a question, and everyone on the bridge knew it. They were trapped in the middle of a fleet that had appeared without warning using technology they didn't understand. The humans were being polite, but the message was clear. Very well, Theklos said after a long pause. I will bring a small diplomatic team down to your world. Wonderful, Kim Dae-ho said, clapping his hands together. We've prepared a landing site in what your records would have called the Korean Peninsula. It's one of our more modest cities. We thought it would be less overwhelming for your first visit. The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in tense silence. Commander, Mordain said quietly. I don't like this. Something is very wrong here. How did they develop so quickly? How do they know so much about us? And where did they get all those ships? Theklos had been wondering the same things. In all their millions of years of space travel, the Veltai had never encountered a species that had developed so rapidly. It violated everything they knew about technological progression. Sir, Zevara called out, I'm analyzing the ship designs around us. Some of them are definitely using Veltai technology, but others... He paused, his tentacles trembling over his controls. Others are using technologies from species that have been missing for hundreds of thousands of years. Missing species? Theklos asked. The Kethvak, the Lumway, the Zorthak, and at least 6 others that I can identify. All races that vanished without explanation sometime in the last 500,000 years. Theklos felt his blood turn to ice. The galaxy had indeed lost contact with several advanced civilizations over the past 500,000 years. Each had simply stopped responding to communications one day, their space going dark. The galactic community had assumed they had either destroyed themselves in wars or been wiped out by some natural disaster. But what if something else had happened to them? Prepare a shuttle, Theklos ordered. I'll take Mordain and Diplomat Yulnara down to the surface. The rest of you maintain position and keep all sensors active. If anything happens to us, you're to return immediately to Veltai space and report what we've found here. Commander, Mordain said, perhaps we should send an unmanned probe first, or request more detailed scans of the landing area. I don't think that will help, Theklos replied grimly. These humans clearly know everything about our capabilities already. Our only choice is to go down there and find out what they want. An hour later, the small Veltai shuttle descended through Earth's atmosphere. As they broke through the clouds, the 3 aliens stared in shock at what lay below them. The Korean Peninsula was covered by a single massive city that stretched beyond the horizon. But this wasn't like any city they had ever seen. The buildings seemed to flow and shift, their surfaces changing color and texture as they watched. Some structures appeared to exist in multiple dimensions at once, visible from angles that shouldn't have been possible. The energy readings are off the charts, Mordain whispered, watching her instruments. Some of these buildings are using more power than our entire homeworld. Transportation networks moved through the air and underground in patterns that made their eyes water to follow. They could see beings moving through the city, but at this distance it was impossible to tell if they were all human or if other species lived there as well. Population estimate? Theklos asked. Mordain checked her readings twice before answering. At least 12 billion individuals in this city alone, Commander. The number was staggering. The most populous world in Veltai space housed barely 2 billion beings, and that was after millions of years of careful population management. Their shuttle was guided to a landing platform that materialized out of thin air as they approached. As they landed, they could see figures waiting for them. Humans, but also others. Beings that looked like they might have been from the missing species they had detected in the orbital fleet. "Commander?" Yulnara said nervously. "I'm not sure our standard diplomatic protocols are going to be adequate for this situation." Teklos nodded grimly as he watched the welcoming committee approach their shuttle. "I don't think anything could have prepared us for this situation." Diplomat. As the shuttle's doors opened and they stepped out onto the platform, Teklos realized that they weren't just making first contact with an advanced human civilization. They were about to learn what had happened to all the missing species in the galaxy. And he was beginning to suspect that the answer was going to be more terrifying than anything they could have imagined. The air around them hummed, with energy that made their skin tingle. In the distance, they could hear sounds that didn't quite fit together, music that used mathematical progressions from different species, voices speaking in languages that shouldn't have existed on this world. As their human guide approached with a warm smile, Teklos felt like they were walking into the mouth of something vast and hungry, something that had been feeding on civilizations for 500,000 years, and now it was their turn to be consumed. Lee So-min approached the Veltai delegation with a warm smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. She appeared to be a young human female, but there was something ancient in the way she moved. Her steps were too precise, her gestures too fluid, as if she had been practicing them for centuries. "Welcome to Seoul Megacity," she said in perfect Veltai, bowing in the traditional manner of their species. "I am Lee So-min, your xenoanthropologist guide. I've been looking forward to meeting representatives of your people for quite some time." Commander Teklos exchanged glances with his companions. The human's bow was not just correct. It included subtle variations that showed deep understanding of Veltai social hierarchy and military protocol. "Your knowledge of our customs is impressive," Diplomat Yulnara said carefully. "We've had time to study," Lee So-min replied. "Please follow me. There's so much to show you." As they walked from the landing platform into the city, the three aliens found themselves struggling to process what they were seeing. The streets moved beneath their feet like flowing water, carrying pedestrians along at varying speeds depending on their destination. Buildings reached impossible heights, their surfaces rippling with displays that showed information in dozens of different alien scripts. "How many people live in this city?" Mordain asked, her scientific training overcoming her fear. "About 12 billion in the greater metropolitan area," Lee So-min answered casually. "It's one of our smaller population centers. The Tokyo-Beijing corridor houses about 30 billion, and the European-African complex has nearly 50 billion residents." The numbers were beyond anything the Veltai could comprehend. Their entire civilization across hundreds of worlds didn't have 50 billion individuals. As they walked, Teklos noticed something disturbing about the humans around them. They moved with an odd coordination, sometimes stopping or turning in perfect unison for no apparent reason. When large groups needed to pass through crowded areas, they flowed around each other like a single organism. "Your people seem very organized," he observed. Lee So-min's smile grew slightly wider. "We've learned the value of cooperation over the millennia. Individual achievement is wonderful, but collective progress is so much more efficient." They entered what appeared to be a transportation hub. Vehicles that looked more like living creatures than machines waited in perfect lines. As the delegation approached, one of the vehicles opened like a flower, revealing a comfortable interior that seemed far larger than the exterior would allow. "Dimensional folding technology," Lee So-min explained, noticing their confusion. "We learned it from the Zorthak Republic about 300,000 years ago. Lovely people. Very good with theoretical physics. The Zorthak Republic disappeared from galactic contact 300,000 years ago," Yulnara said slowly. "Did they?" Lee So-min asked, tilting her head. "How interesting. I'll have to ask some of my colleagues about that." The vehicle carried them through the city at incredible speed, but so smoothly that they barely felt the movement. Through the transparent walls, they could see layers of the city, extending both up and down far beyond what should have been possible. Gardens floated in midair, connected by bridges that spanned impossible distances. "Where are we going?" Teklos asked. "To the Museum of Species Development," Lee So-min replied. "We thought you might find it educational." They stopped at a building that seemed to exist in several dimensions at once. Its entrance was both a simple doorway and a vast portal that opened onto scenes of different worlds under alien suns. Inside, the museum was even more disorienting. Corridors stretched in directions that didn't exist, and exhibition halls contained artifacts from civilizations spanning the galaxy. Choi Min-ho, the museum's historian, met them in the main hall. He was a tall human male with kind eyes and a gentle manner that somehow made him more frightening than if he had been openly threatening. "Welcome, honored guests," he said, his Veltai accent perfect. "We've prepared a special tour for you. Please, this way." The first exhibition hall contained artifacts that made Theklos' heart skip. Weapons and armor from the warrior Kethvak Empire were displayed alongside delicate art pieces from the peaceful Lumway Collective. Scientific instruments from the Zorthak Republic sat next to musical devices from the harmonious Velnari Chorus. All species that had vanished from the galaxy within the last 500,000 years. "These are remarkable reproductions," Mordain said, her voice shaking slightly. "Oh, these aren't reproductions," Choi Min-ho said cheerfully. "These are the original artifacts. We've been collecting them as we've encountered each species." "Encountered?" Yulnara asked. "Yes, during our expansion phase. After we achieved interstellar travel, we began systematic contact with every inhabited world in our galactic region. It's been quite an educational experience." They moved to the next hall, which contained what appeared to be biological samples. Preserved specimens from dozens of different species floated in clear containers, each labeled with scientific names and behavioral notes. "We've learned so much from studying different forms of life," Lee So-min said, running her hand lovingly along one of the containers. "Each species has unique solutions to the challenges of existence. The Kethvak developed incredible physical strength. The Lumway created the most beautiful art in the galaxy. The Zorthak could manipulate matter at the quantum level." "Where are these species now?" Theklos asked, though he was beginning to suspect he already knew the answer. "They're still here," Choi Min-ho said, looking puzzled by the question. "Why would they be anywhere else?" "But they don't exist as independent civilizations anymore," Mordain said. "Independent?" Lee So-min repeated the word as if it tasted strange. "Why would anyone choose to be independent when they could be part of something greater?" She led them to a viewing window that looked out over the city. As they watched, the movements of the billions of inhabitants below began to make sense. They weren't moving randomly. They were moving as parts of a vast organism, each individual playing their role in something incomprehensibly large. "When your people first visited Earth 500,000 years ago," Lee So-min continued, "you left behind traces of your technology in our atmosphere, microscopic particles from your ship's engines, fragments of your communication equipment. Our scientists found these anomalies and spent thousands of years learning to understand them." "That's impossible," Mordain protested. "Those traces would have been far too small and advanced for a primitive civilization to detect." "You're right," Choi Min-ho agreed. "It took us nearly 50,000 years just to prove that the anomalies existed, another 100,000 to understand what they were. But once we realized that there were other intelligent species in the galaxy, we dedicated our entire civilization to learning about them." "Your entire civilization?" Theklos asked. "Every human being," Lee So-min confirmed. "Every resource, every moment of every life focused on a single goal, to meet our galactic neighbors and learn from them." The horror of it began to sink in. An entire species had spent 500,000 years preparing for contact with other civilizations. They had turned themselves into something designed for one purpose: absorption of other forms of life. "The first species we contacted was the Velnari Chorus," Choi Min-ho said, moving to another display. "Beautiful singers with voices that could harmonize across dimensional barriers. They taught us so much about communication and cooperation." "What happened to them?" Yulnara whispered. "They became part of us," Lee So-min said simply. "Their knowledge, their culture, their very essence was preserved and integrated into human society. They didn't disappear. They evolved into something greater." In the display case, a recording device began to play. The sound that emerged was hauntingly beautiful, harmonies that seemed to come from everywhere at once, sung by voices that were both human and utterly alien. "Every species we've encountered has added something valuable to our collective experience," Choi Min-ho explained. "The Kethvak taught us about strength and honor. The Lumway showed us beauty and creativity. The Zorthak expanded our understanding of reality itself. And the Veltai?" Theklos asked, his voice barely audible. Lee So-min turned to face him directly, and for a moment her eyes seemed to contain depths that spanned millennia. The Veltai will teach us about patience and wisdom. Your people have survived for millions of years, maintaining stability across vast distances of space and time. That knowledge will be invaluable as we continue to grow. The three aliens stood in stunned silence, finally understanding what they had stumbled into. Humanity hadn't just developed advanced technology in 500,000 years. They had transformed themselves into something that existed to consume other civilizations, preserving their knowledge and essence while absorbing them into an ever-growing collective. And now it was the Veltai's turn to be absorbed. The Seoul's Enological Research Institute rose from the earth like a living mountain, its surface covered in patterns that hurt to look at directly. As their transport approached the building, Teklos noticed that the structure seemed to be breathing, expanding and contracting in a slow, steady rhythm. The building is alive, Mordain whispered, her instruments detecting biological processes mixed with advanced technology. In a sense, yes, Lee So-min replied. We've learned that the distinction between living and mechanical systems is largely artificial. Why build dead machines when you can grow living tools that adapt and improve themselves? They entered through an opening that dilated like an iris, revealing corridors that pulsed with soft light. The walls were covered in what looked like neural networks, carrying information through the building like thoughts through a brain. Bang Hye-jin, chief of evolutionary sciences, met them in the main laboratory. She was a small woman with bright eyes that seemed to see far more than they should. When she smiled, Teklos noticed that her teeth were slightly too sharp. Welcome, honored guests, she said in Veltai that carried subtle emotional undertones no human should have been able to master. I understand you have questions about our development process. The laboratory around them was vast, filled with equipment that combined technology from dozens of different species. In one corner, HFY genetic modification chambers worked alongside Lumway artistic creation matrices. Zorthak reality manipulation devices hummed next to machines of unknown origin. But the most disturbing sight was the workers. Beings that looked human at first glance but showed subtle signs of other species. One researcher had the enhanced musculature of the HFY. Another displayed the elongated limbs and graceful movements of the Lumway. A third seemed to phase slightly in and out of reality like the Zorthak. These are your people? Gulnara asked, her voice shaking. These are all our people, Bang Hye-jin replied. Human, HFY, Lumway, Zorthak, and 17 other species all working together as one civilization. But they look human, Mordain observed. The human form has proven to be remarkably adaptable, Bang Hye-jin explained, leading them deeper into the laboratory. We can incorporate the best traits of any species while maintaining our basic physical structure. It's quite efficient. They stopped at a viewing window that looked down into a vast chamber. Inside, Teklos could see what appeared to be thousands of individuals floating in tanks filled with glowing liquid. They were all at different stages of some kind of transformation process. What are they? He asked, though he dreaded the answer. New citizens, Bang Hye-jin said proudly. Members of various species who have chosen to join our civilization. The integration process takes time, but the results are wonderful. Nam Tae-young, director of biological integration, joined them at the window. He was a tall man with kind eyes, but there was something predatory in the way he moved. Each species brings unique gifts to our collective, he explained. The challenge is preserving what makes them special while allowing them to become part of something greater. You're destroying them, Teklos said, his voice filled with horror. Destroying? Nam Tae-young looked genuinely puzzled. We're preserving them, forever. Every memory, every piece of knowledge, every cultural tradition. Instead of being lost when their bodies die, they become part of an eternal civilization. One of the tanks near the window began to glow brighter. Inside, a being that looked like it might have been HFY was changing, its form becoming more human, while retaining some of its original characteristics. The process is completely voluntary, Bang Hye-jin added. We never force anyone to join us. They choose to become part of our family because they understand the benefits. What benefits? Yulnara asked. In response, Nam Tae-young gestured to one of the workers in the laboratory. The being, who looked mostly human but moved with the fluid grace of the Lumway, approached them with a serene smile. This is Dr. Park Soo-jin, Nam Tae-young said. She was originally from the Lumway Collective. Would you like to tell our guests about your experience? Dr. Park Soo-jin nodded, and when she spoke, her voice carried the musical tones that were characteristic of the Lumway species. Before integration, I was a single mind, trapped in one body, limited by my individual perspective. Now I am part of something magnificent. I can access the memories and knowledge of millions of beings. I can experience art and beauty through the senses of dozens of different species. I am more than I ever could have been alone. But you're not Lumway anymore, Mordain protested. I am still Lumway, Dr. Park Soo-jin replied. But I am also human and Kethvak and Zorthak and so much more. I have not lost my identity. I have expanded it beyond anything my species ever thought possible. Bang Hee-jin led them to another section of the laboratory, where Yoon Ji-hee, a consciousness coordinator, was working with what appeared to be pure energy patterns floating in containment fields. These are consciousness matrices, Yoon Ji-hee explained. When a being joins our civilization, we preserve not just their body and memories, but their essential self, their soul, if you will. These patterns can be transferred, shared, or temporarily accessed by other members of our collective. To demonstrate, she approached one of the energy patterns and placed her hand on the containment field. Immediately, her posture changed. Her eyes took on a fierce light, and when she spoke, it was in the ancient language of the Kethvak warrior caste. I am Warlord Thekshan of the Crimson Fleet, she said in a voice that carried the weight of authority. I fought in the Battle of Seven Suns and led my people to victory against the void creatures of the outer darkness. Then her posture relaxed, and she was Yoon Ji-hee again. Warlord Thekshan has been dead for 200,000 years, she said with a smile. But his memories, his experiences, his knowledge of warfare and leadership, all of that lives on within our collective consciousness. This is an abomination, Theklos whispered. Is it? Bang Hee-jin asked gently. We've eliminated death, ended loneliness, and created a civilization where every individual can access the accumulated wisdom of millions of beings. We've solved problems that plagued our species for millennia: war, poverty, disease, the fear of being forgotten. You've eliminated individuality, Yulnara said. We've evolved beyond the limitations of individuality, Nam Tae-young corrected. Each person in our civilization retains their unique perspective and personality, but they're no longer isolated. They're part of a family that spans the galaxy. As if to prove the point, every human in the laboratory suddenly turned to look at the Veltai delegation. For a moment, their eyes all held the same expression: ancient, patient, and hungry. We understand this is difficult for you to accept, Bang Hee-jin said, her voice now carrying harmonics from multiple species. Your people value independence and individual achievement. But consider this: how many Veltai have lived and died in your civilization's history? How much knowledge, wisdom, and beauty has been lost forever when those individuals passed away? The truth of her words hit Theklos like a physical blow. Billions of Veltai had lived and died over their millions of years of existence. Each had been unique, irreplaceable, and when they died, everything they were had vanished forever. In our civilization, Yoon Ji-hee continued, nothing is ever truly lost. Every painting, every song, every moment of love or insight or joy is preserved for all time. Death becomes simply another transition, like graduation from one level of existence to the next. And if we refuse? Mordain asked, though her voice suggested she already knew the answer. The humans in the laboratory all smiled at once, and for a moment the expression on their faces was both perfectly human and utterly alien. Why would you refuse? Bang Hee-jin asked. You've seen what we've become. You've witnessed the beauty and complexity of our civilization. You know that your people face the same choice that every species eventually faces: evolve or become extinct. We're offering you immortality, Nam Tae-young added. Not just for your bodies, but for everything that makes you who you are. Your culture, your knowledge, your unique perspective on the universe, all of it preserved forever in a civilization that will span the galaxy. As they stood in the laboratory surrounded by beings that had once been different species, the three Veltai finally understood the true horror of what they had discovered. Humanity hadn't conquered the galaxy through force. They had made themselves irresistible, offering something that no rational being could refuse: the chance to live forever as part of something greater than themselves. And now they were offering the same choice to the Veltai. As the Veltai delegation prepared to return to their ship, they were escorted to a magnificent chamber at the top of the Seoul Xenological Research Institute. The room seemed to exist outside normal space, with windows that showed views of distant galaxies and impossible star formations. Seo Jun-ho, director of Galactic Integration Protocols, waited for them there. He was a man of indeterminate age with eyes that held the weight of centuries. When he moved, it was with the combined grace of a dozen different species. "I hope your visit has been educational," he said, his voice carrying subtle harmonics that seemed to speak directly to their souls. "We wanted you to understand what we've become before making your decision." "What decision?" Commander Theklos asked, though he suspected he already knew. "Whether to remain as you are or to join us in the next stage of evolution," Seo Jun-ho replied simply. "Every species faces this choice eventually. Some choose to evolve, others choose to remain isolated until they eventually fade into extinction." The air in the chamber shimmered, and another figure materialized beside Seo Jun-ho. At first glance, she appeared human, but as Theklos looked closer, he recognized the subtle features of a Veltai. The same four-armed structure, the same elongated skull, but somehow made beautiful in a way that no pure Veltai had ever achieved. "This is Kang Da-bin," Seo Jun-ho said. "She was a member of a Veltai exploration team that visited us about 50,000 years ago. She chose to stay and become part of our civilization." Kang Da-bin stepped forward, and when she spoke it was in perfect Veltai, but with undertones that suggested vast depths of experience. "Brothers and sisters of my birth species," she said, "I greet you with joy. It has been so long since I have spoken with pure Veltai." "You're one of us," Mordain whispered in shock. "I was," Kang Da-bin agreed. "And I still am, but I am also so much more. Would you like to experience what I have become?" Before any of them could respond, Kang Da-bin reached out with one graceful hand. The moment her fingers touched Theklos' arm, his mind exploded with sensation. Suddenly, he could feel the thoughts and emotions of billions of beings across the earth. He experienced the joy of a Lumway artist creating a masterpiece, felt the fierce pride of a Kethvak warrior defending his family, understood the deep mathematical beauty that the Zorthak saw in the structure of reality itself. For a brief moment, he was not alone. The crushing isolation that every individual being carried throughout their entire existence was gone, replaced by connection to something vast and loving and eternal. Then Kang Da-bin withdrew her hand, and Theklos was alone in his own mind again. The loneliness felt like a physical wound. "That is what we offer," she said gently. "Not the destruction of who you are, but the expansion of who you can become. I remember every moment of my life as a pure Veltai, but I also carry the memories and experiences of millions of other beings. I have lived 1,000 lifetimes and loved through 1,000 different hearts, but you're not free," Yulnara protested weakly. "Free?" Kang Da-bin laughed, and the sound held harmonies from a dozen different species. "I am more free than I ever was as an individual. Free from loneliness, free from the fear of death, free from the limitations of a single perspective. I am part of something that will explore every star in the galaxy and beyond." Seo Jun-ho gestured toward the windows showing the impossible views of space. "Your people have been traveling between stars for millions of years," he said. "But you remain essentially unchanged. You visit new worlds, catalog new species, but you never truly grow. We offer something different. Endless evolution, eternal expansion, unlimited potential. What happens to our civilization if we refuse?" Theklos asked. "Nothing happens," Seo Jun-ho replied. "You return to Veltai space and continue as you always have. But consider this. How many more species will you encounter in your travels? How many will you observe and catalog and then leave behind? How many opportunities for growth will you pass by because you fear change? And if we accept? Then the Veltai become part of something greater," Kang Da-bin said. "Your knowledge, your culture, your unique way of seeing the universe, all of it preserved and shared with beings across the galaxy. Your children will never know loneliness or fear of death. They will explore realities that you cannot even imagine." Mordain stepped forward, her scientific curiosity overcoming her fear. "The integration process, is it truly voluntary for every individual?" "Completely," Seo Jun-ho confirmed. "We never force anyone to join us, but we do offer them the choice and we show them what they could become. Most beings, when faced with the option between isolation and connection, choose connection. What about those who refuse? They remain as they are." Kang Dabin said sadly. We care for them, protect them, love them as family. But they remain alone in their own minds until their natural deaths. It's heartbreaking, actually. Like watching someone choose to remain blind when they could see the full spectrum of light. The chamber fell silent as the three Veltai considered what they had heard. Finally, Theklos spoke. We need time to consider this decision. Of course, Seo Junho said. Take all the time you need. But remember, time itself is limited for those who remain individual. We have all of eternity. As they prepared to leave, Kang Dabin approached them one final time. I want to give you something, she said, pressing a small device into Theklos' hand. It contains samples of our technology, gifts to help your people advance their science. Why? Theklos asked. Because I still love my birth species, she replied, and I want you to have every advantage when you make your choice. The return journey to their ship passed in stunned silence. As their shuttle rose through Earth's atmosphere, they could see the true scope of human civilization spread below them. Cities that spanned continents, orbital structures that dwarfed their largest space stations, ships moving between the stars in numbers that defied counting. Back aboard the Eternal Wanderer, the three aliens stood on the bridge looking at the small device Kang Dabin had given them. It was already interfacing with their ship's computers, sharing technological advances that would revolutionize Veltai science. It's a trap, Mordain said quietly. They're seducing us with their technology. Is it a trap if the bait is genuine? Theklos asked. These advances could solve problems our people have struggled with for millennia. And once we start using their technology, we'll become dependent on it, Yulnara observed. Our people will want more. They'll start asking questions about where it came from. And eventually, they'll want to meet the beings who created it, Theklos finished. As their ship began its journey back to Veltai space, Theklos composed his report to the Confederation Council. He included everything they had learned, all the evidence of what humanity had become, and his recommendations for how to proceed. But he knew it was already too late. The moment they activated the human technology, the process would begin. His people would become curious about the beings who had created such marvels. Scientists would want to study human achievements. Philosophers would debate the implications of collective consciousness. And eventually someone would suggest that maybe, just maybe, the humans were right. Maybe individual existence was just a primitive stage that species needed to evolve beyond. The choice wouldn't happen all at once. It would be gradual. A slow shift in thinking that would span generations. But the end result would be the same. One day the Veltai would choose to join the vast collective that was spreading across the galaxy. As Earth shrank behind them, Theklos realized that they hadn't just made first contact with an advanced civilization. They had met their future. Humanity wasn't conquering the galaxy through force. They were becoming the galaxy, one species at a time. And every encounter, every moment of contact, every sample of technology shared was another step toward that inevitable future. The galaxy's fate had been decided the moment the first species chose to join humanity. Everything since then had just been the slow process of evolution catching up with destiny. In the end, there really was no choice at all. There was only the question of how long each species would take to realize it.